DS was my first console, and the one thing I loved about it was the games that were on it. I had plenty of them and they were definitely well loved. I even had these. With these, I could play any and all DS games ever. The entire DS catalog in the palm of my hand. But among them were games like these. Some ports are actually good, and a lot of them are actually bad, like way worse than the original. You know, making DS games wasn't as easy as most companies thought, especially when you mix budget cuts and fraudulent business practices into the mix. But before we get into any of that, what made this little dude so special? When the DS came out, it was something that the gaming world had never seen before. Pretty much everybody owned one, and it was easy to see why. For one, it was portable, which is huge. I personally loved playing Mario during church. And the games? Oh, don't get me started on the games. This console housed so many classics. It was one of the best times to be a Pokemon fan. There were plenty of Mario games. They even had Sonic on there killing it. They had it all. It seemed like anything that was sold on this thing was an instant classic. But of course, plenty games were not instant classics. In fact, they were stinkers. They were stinky. The amount of shovelware on the DS is actually kind of surprising. Part of the reason to blame is because it was such a small console. The file size for a single game could only go up to half a megabyte, so not much was needed to make a game like at all. Pretty much any company who could make a DS game did. Disney pumped out so many tie-in games that nobody asked for. Everyone was getting kart racers and platformers, and slowly but surely, we saw games on big consoles get ported over. At first it made sense, as most of the ports were just graphics downgrades. But Call of Duty had no business being on a DS, but we'll get to that a little later. Over time, DS ports hit a point where they were either unfinished, buggy messes that only got pushed out to make a quick buck, or it was just a good game. I want to start out with a few of the good ones to kind of show you what could be and what should have been. Plants vs. Zombies had one of the best DS ports ever, and it expanded on everything that was already given. You can't even call it a graphical downgrade. All they did was pixelize everything to not only accommodate for the smaller screen size, but also as just a stylistic choice. Even the music was changed to more of like a pixelated 8-bit just to make it align with everything. This is like the gold standard of DS ports, and I hope you're ready because it's all just kind of downhill from here. Cars Racerama. It's a textbook DS port really. You know, downgraded graphics, similar storyline as the main game, same gameplay with only a few things removed here and there. It's not the worst port ever, but it's not exactly the best. I mean, this did a good job, but what about things like the Lego games, for example? Now, the Lego games are great. Not only are they graphical downgrades, they're also reworked and recoded to work with the DS's hardware limitations. For example, in LEGO Pirates of the Caribbean, a lot of the puzzles and stages have you using 2 minifigures to do anything. LEGO decided to remake every single stage so that it was now playable on the DS. And that's because if the DS had to load in more than 1 minifigure on screen, it would explode. Between you and me, I also love Lego Rock Band, but the one thing I never liked was that if you did any kind of ad-libs, you're like, "What's up everybody, welcome to my show!" They would get mad at you and they would take points away from you. The Guitar Hero port didn't do that. It even came with one of those little extendo tool nub thingies. And what's cool is that it actually ported over really well, because I mean, Guitar Hero, you really only need to see the chart and you need to have good inputs. So things like the characters didn't really matter. So this is a good port. Rayman has had a very interesting track record. The first Raving Rabbids DS game is nothing like the console one at all. Instead of being a mini game fest, it's more so just a platformer. I mean, there are some, but it's definitely flipped on purpose, though the story is pretty much the same. But what's weird is that Rayman Raving Rabbids 2 and Rabbids TV Party are just both mini game games. Like, sure, some of the core features are different, but it's basically the same thing. Rabbids Go Home is neither of those things. In fact, it's a complex puzzle game. Honestly, I should have tempered my expectations because it wasn't 3D platformer like it is on the Wii, though it does share the same premise, just get the Rabbids to the moon. This game would have been fine as its own thing, but as a downgrade of Rabbids Go Home, it was interesting to say the least. It's definitely not the best, but at least it's better than Hot Wheels Beat That. This game released alongside versions for the Wii, Xbox, PlayStation, and as expected, that meant less content. If you look really close, that yellow car right there, not in the game, And then the car right here, it's also not in the game, which is really weird. And you know, despite all of that, I still enjoyed this game, and I've 99%ed it like at least twice now, because one of the main features of this game is a tournament mode where you earn flames and you gotta collect so many to 100% the game, whatever. So the track Desktop Dash is a really cool track, whatever. You just drive around on a keyboard, whatever, blah, blah, blah. One of the objectives of the tournament is to go through a shortcut on that track, but there isn't a shortcut on that track because the developers didn't put the shortcut in the track. So it's just impossible to win. It's impossible to 100% this game. So fun fact about this game, it did not get the worst rating out of all of the ports for it. That honor would go to the Xbox and PC version. Why, you might ask? Well, when you use a certain item on those consoles, it actually lags your game like really bad, like really, really, really bad. But you know, this is a rare case of it not living up to its potential, because sometimes porting over something that's bad on the original console it's on can actually make it better. It's happened before, but unfortunately with Eminem's Racing, it's not one of those times. Like, look at the gameplay I'm showing. It's immediately obvious why. I mean, the whole premise is fine, I guess. It's a kart racing game. They have this Kyle Busch NASCAR thing. It makes sense, right? Eminem's was really weird because from the Game Boy Advanced era and even a little bit farther back, and they just never work. You shouldn't be fighting the car to drive. And this game actively fights you. Not only do you have to be a good racer, but you have to go out of your way to find M&Ms to continuously fuel your car throughout the race. And the longer you go without collecting any, the slower you get. And the CPUs, they're not affected by it. So you can be in first all race and then lap 3 hits and you're in 4th getting lapped. It's bad. Also, it's not like traditional kart racers where it's like a 4 tracks, you win the cup, go to the next cup kind of formula. The whole game is 1 cup. So if you get 2nd place on any of those tracks, you can't 100% the game. My theory is that this game exists solely to sell more NASCAR merchandise, right? Because this was about the time when Kyle Busch just got sponsored. They had this brand new shiny car. You know, they didn't need that to hook me, obviously, because I have this, but I don't know if it worked. I really couldn't tell you if it worked. Marketing was weird for the M&Ms. It's always been weird for the M&Ms. This is their attempt to get into the sports world, right? The hard thing about the sports world is that it doesn't translate well over to video games. The idea of putting myself in the shoes of LeBron James or Tom Brady is really good. And there are some games like these that actually do a really good job of doing that. But more often than not, they just produce a lot of stinkers. Madden. One of the most slow, agonizing experiences I've ever had to deal with. Imagine being able to run 1 play every 30 seconds. Is it realistic? Yes. Is it fun? No. Madden just never translated well to the DS. I mean, the 3DS version was definitely a step up, and I think the 3DS version deserved to be on the console, but this one was just bad. It was undercooked. It was horrible. And I think it's because of the limitations of the little cartridge. You know, 512 megabytes isn't a lot. That's only half a gigabyte. That's why the NBA, 2K, and all that, they didn't even bother. It was just too ambitious for the time, unfortunately, which happens to a lot of ports, like Call of Duty. I told you I'd get to Call of Duty eventually. So not every game had as seamless as a transition to DS, like I said with Madden. Call of Duty was unfortunately one of those games. And let me tell you, it's not easy to port a game meant for 2 analog sticks to a system that only has a cross pad and an ABYX thing. That's just not gonna work. So you had 2 options. You either use the ABYX as an additional analog stick, or you use the touchscreen, which was really uncomfortable and just wasn't a good idea at all. What's funnier is that the PSP, a console with 2 analog sticks, suffered the same fate. You had to use the ABYX or you just use touchscreen, even though there was a 2nd analog stick. And I mean, they made multiple of these. Like, the one that I completed 100% was Modern Warfare 4. And then I realized, wait a minute, there's Black Ops on the DS? Wait, there's Modern Warfare Mobilized on the DS. I gotta get these things. So I went on a wild goose chase to find these. I think I got this for like 10 bucks. And honestly, it's just not good. These are just watered down versions of Call of Duty. The campaign is still fine, like it's good, it handles well for a DS game, and it looks fine for a DS game. Like, they definitely push these games to the limit. This one did a little too much, if you ask me. One of the best things about Black Ops, in my opinion, is the zombies mode. And this has a zombies mode. But the problem with it is it's so watered down, it's just not even enjoyable. It's just something you waste your time on. For example, the zombies one-shot you. Doors can cost anywhere from 2,000 to 10,000 points. It just isn't that good. I think the idea of Black Ops even functioning on a DS is really funny, and I think that the fact that they pulled it off That's just crazy. Like, hats off to Activision, because nobody expected this, nobody asked for this, but they got it anyway, and they did a decent job. Like, they could have done so many different things. They could have made Call of Duty Kart, or like a Call of Duty platformer like Contra or something. Speaking of Call of Duty Kart, what about the worst racing game of all time? Need for Speed Most Wanted. So Need for Speed is defined by two things for me: the speed, and consequentially the cars that you can drive, and then how smooth the gameplay feels, right? Because you're going to be driving away from cops, you're going to be driving other people, you're going to be doing a lot of crazy shit. Imagine they took both of those things away and handed you this. This is Need for Speed Most Wanted. What you're watching right now is actual DS gameplay. This feels like a scratch game. It feels like a rough draft of the game. If you bump into anything the wrong way, including other cars, you lose all your momentum. It just feels like something out of Roblox or something. It's just not good. Even as a kid, I knew this game was ass. Apparently it was rushed to all hell, and this is probably because Sensory Suite, the developers, were not paying unemployment insurance for over 100 days! They also avoided bankruptcy not once, not twice, but like at least 4 times! In the span of 4 years, no less! What were they doing over there? All you need to know is that this game was a scam to make as much money as possible. It almost ruined an IP in the process. And what's crazy is that there are multiple Need for Speed games on the DS. Look at Need for Speed Pro Street, for example. This game is actually good. They have good car models. It feels nice to drive. It feels like a good game. Like, at least we know what it could have been. Need for Speed. Even with all these bad ports, the console was still thriving. And then the 3DS and Wii U came out. And it didn't stop, it just got worse. It was harder for companies to justify making shitty games when most of the games coming out now were actually good. It just wasn't gonna fly anymore. And believe me, they still tried to make it work. Hotel Transylvania has no business being on a 3DS. There were also games like Angry Birds and Doodle Jump apparently on the 3DS, and I mean that's fine I guess, because they would never charge like more than 30 bucks for them when I would always see them at Toys R Us. But you know, there's some things that just shouldn't exist, like Minecraft for the 3DS. The 3DS and the Wii U were not profitable for a while. Nintendo execs had to take price cuts just to kind of stabilize everything. Honestly, I'm gonna miss it, because honestly it was cool how some ports worked around the limitations of the console, but now the easy cop out is just changing the graphics to like really low. But you know, I guess that meant it was time to move on to smaller and somehow graphically worse pastures.